So, what have we got? Whether we all like it or not, choose it or not, one way or another, we get ourselves roped into someone else's quarrel. And with this quarrel going on in the Middle East, it's kind of, there's a prophetic element to it, as in prophetic, that word prophetic, as in pointing to prophecy regarding the lands. Well, particularly the land of Israel, and whether anyone understands this completely or not, who knows? But you do find yourself looking into these things, seeing as we're all roped into this big quarrel out there in the Middle East, and of course we got the economic repercussions already, and then there's the nation rising against nation, all this sort of stuff, and all of this war that could break out and is breaking out in the Middle East. Now, for anyone to say they totally understand the whole situation would be kind of asking, do we? Well, you can look up various verses regarding the land of Israel, and these are in prophecy. And exactly the time period that these prophecies unfold, again, who knows, but we are looking at the last days. And so you kind of visualize it in reading what you read, that these words written here in Zechariah chapter 12 are very interesting to look into and try to understand, and to see the prophetic link to these verses to the land of Israel. I mean, how many lands are there in the world? And one of these is singled out, and it's the land of Israel. And we're all kind of roped into the quarrels of the Middle East regarding the land of Israel. Though apparently, and it is about Iran at the moment, but again, you've got the land of Israel, what's called the burdensome stone in these verses, and we can only draw our own conclusions, though some would say they understand it better, and who knows who does. So chapter 12, the burden, I guess that's like a desire, a strong desire. It's written here in great big block letters, the burden, so it's something serious, I guess, for emphasis there. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel. So there we are, we're talking about Israel. Do we ever not talk about Israel in these days? The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretcheth, so this is coming from a reliable source, in other words, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens. So you got someone who stretched forth the heavens and layeth the foundation of the earth. Now you sit up and listen to such a person. This is the one God, Lord, Jesus, God, who stretched forth the heavens. So sit up and listen. This is coming from a very high place, the Lord who stretched forth the heavens and layeth the foundation of the earth. So that's kind of carrying quite a weight, that if this is coming from God himself, the one who created the heavens and the earth, then sit up and listen. And formeth the spirit of man. This is a bit more personal here. The spirit of man within him. Well, we've all got a spirit within us. So God's the one who formed the spirit of man within him. So comforting to know the one who stretched forth the heavens, the one who laid the foundation of the earth, is now speaking and acknowledging that he's the one, and formeth the spirit of man within man. How encouraging is that? Now we're suddenly going to jump into the burdensome stone and so on. Verse 2, behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about. So I guess you're kind of looking at the Middle East, and those that get involved within the quarrel of the Middle East are kind of all around about, whether they're living there or not. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem, in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. Interesting that there. Behold, I make Jerusalem a cup of trembling. So I guess with that verse, you're looking at, anything going on out there in the Middle East regarding Jerusalem. There's obviously a big quarrel going on out there regarding Jerusalem and the land of Israel, Jerusalem being the capital of Israel. Whoever rules in Jerusalem rules in Israel, I guess. So this quarrel is quite, for a lot of us, it's becoming a bit of a cup of, if you had a cup in your hand and you were drinking water, tea, or wine, or whatever it is you drink in your cup, then you might look on the news and find yourself kind of trembling with that cup in your hand when you hear the news stories as to what on earth is coming out of the quarrel in the Middle East regarding the land of Israel and Jerusalem. So a cup of trembling, something that's going to make you, wow, what's going on? This is serious. It could affect me. It could affect my family. It could affect my children. It could affect the world. It could affect the future. It could affect the world economy. It could affect the stock market. It could affect World War III and all this sort of stuff. Kind of, whoa. So, behold, I make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in siege of both against Judah and against Jerusalem. So there's a siege there, some sort of war. In that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. Well, if you break that verse down, that does put in all of the nations and the peoples of the world into the burdensome stone. And remember here, it's even those that are living in the land that are going to burden themselves with the burdensome stone. The people in the land, should they be in the land? Some would argue yes, some would argue no. So those within the land and those outside the land in the immediate area and those outside the land further out are all going to find Jerusalem. I guess the capital there is Jerusalem, whether they should have one divided amongst the Palestinians and the Jews, all this sort of stuff, or whether the Jews should rule there and who has their temple there and their religion there and their covenant there is the biggest deal here. Who has their covenant there? In other words, their agreement with God there, and who has their covenant and agreement with God acknowledged via their particular brand of faith and religion, is really the root and of the whole quarrel. Largely, there's a religious quarrel. And here you have a prophetic words. So let's read that again. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all the people. Now, words of that, whether you believe it or not, whether you think we're in those times or not, the fact of the matter is that Jerusalem and Israel has become a burdensome stone for all people. So it's kind of like a stone that no one can quite lift and move and know what to do about. If you've got this massive grey burdensome stone that's getting in the way of everything, and you're finding it hard to know what on earth to do with this burdensome stone, it's a weight to carry, and no one can quite solve the problem of what to do with this burdensome stone. You can picture it stuck in the middle of a motorway, if you like, and it's blocking up traffic, and there's traffic coming in all directions and can't get to where they're trying to get to because this burdensome stone is so big and so huge that no one quite knows what to do about it. And this burdensome stone is right out there in the Middle East. And here it's called, in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. Why? Why would you be cut in pieces for trying to solve this problem in the Middle East with this burdensome stone? Well, you could say Jerusalem and Israel have always been a holy land. So anyone who meddles and messes with holy affairs regarding Jerusalem, let's say, let's go back to Belshazzar's banquet. he stole these cups from God's temple in that day. And so he calls for these silver and gold cups to come to him, to his party. And then he fills those cups, these sacred kind of holy cups, with wine. And then starts praising every other god but God himself. Wow, suddenly what happened to him? Suddenly this hand appears, and we get the writing on the wall prophecy, all pointing to the demise of Belshazzar that same night. And the Medes and Persians took over, and Belshazzar was killed that very same night. Why? Because he meddled in holy affairs regarding God, and these holy cups were made for holy reasons regarding the praise of God, and not the praise of gold, silver, and every other idol that he could imagine when he used the cup to toast those gods, and as opposed to toasting and praising the God whom those cups were made for. So you can look at it like that it's a kind of holy land. The land of Jerusalem and the land of Israel has always been like God's country. And anyone who meddles with the affairs out there is messing with God. Even if you live there, that is. You can't just have the view that just because you live there, you have some divine right to be there. You could very well not have a divine right to be there, and you could very well be one of those that have gone there and stolen the lands, like Nebuchadnezzar stole the cups, like Belshazzar praised every other god but God himself with sacred cups. So you've got a sacred, symbolic land, the land of Jerusalem, the land of Israel, God's land, a holy land, and those who meddle with the affairs out there is messing not only with world politics and power and economics and all of this, but is also meddling and messing with God. So in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All of that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. Because you're messing with God when you mess with holy, symbolic holy lands. That's not to suggest that the people in the land are holy. We're talking about the symbolic reference of Jerusalem and Israel being God's land. That doesn't imply that the people there are God's people. The people there are in fact out of covenant with God because they're not in covenant with Jesus. Crucifying your king 2,000 years ago would be cutting off your head. And therefore, the people in the land of Israel haven't gone to the land of Israel and Jerusalem in belief. They're there in unbelief, so they're out of covenant, out of agreement with God, and therefore they are burdening themselves with the burdensome stone. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people, that's including the people in the land, as the problem is these days. You go over to America and they misinterpret prophecies. They have the view that God has placed the children of Israel in that land. They placed them back there, and therefore they're in some kind of agreement with God. They're the apple of God's eye and all this. And God's going to protect them from all the nations round about, and all the nations round about are those who are meddling in the affairs of Israel. But actually the reality is that those within the land are also meddling themselves with the affairs of Jerusalem and Israel being a holy land, God's land. And therefore, if you're not there in accord with God, in agreement with God, and in covenant with God, when the true covenant with God is through Jesus, then you are also meddling in the affairs of the burdensome stone out there, and you're one of those that are going to be, as it says here, in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. So there's the land of Israel in the last days, and we've got this burdensome stone. No one knows quite what to do about it, including the people in the land, don't know quite what to do about this burdensome stone out there. And therefore we have all of this trouble in the world regarding the same kind of thinking that we've got here in this prophecy. And do we view this with a media prophetic fulfillment, an intermediate, and ultimately this can only get worse and worse before Jesus comes back? So I guess you would really look at it in the kind of immediate sense, being now it's been going on for years, and then you've got the intermediate sense where they might even think they've solved the problem, and then they find they haven't solved the problem, it's still burdensome stone. And then the ultimate sense for when Jesus suddenly comes back. So suddenly Jesus will come back and sort out the whole quarrel of the Middle East. Jesus' feet will touch down on the Mount of Olives. And it says the Mount of Olives, it was actually going to split in two when Jesus' feet touched down on the Mount of Olives. And finally, when Jesus comes back, the quarrel and the burdensome stone and all of this, the cup of trembling, will all be over.